All right, so Socrates is not buying what Thrasymachus is selling and tells him why, and then kind of throws it back and says, dude, the definition of justice you have offered me has an internal inconsistency. It's a self-contradictory definition. Give it another shot. And at this point, Thrasymachus does something that is very common for people to do in arguments. He says this: you argue like a quibbler, Socrates. And what he means is that you're what people would tell us is you're splitting hairs, or you're arguing over semantics. And I would encourage you to never let someone dismiss your objections or your arguments based on either of those things. If it's important to split a hair, split the damn hair. If we're having a conversation about what something is, semantics matter. So this is a way that people try to get out of a flawed argument or a flawed definition that they've made, and it's to sort of throw back to you and say, you're not really even arguing anymore. But I think Socrates has raised a legitimate point, and eventually Thrasymachus comes to agree that he does as well, and so he offers another definition. The ruler, insofar as he is the ruler, is unerring. And being unerring always commands that which is for his own interest. In other words, someone is a true ruler, deserving of that title, only when faithfully practicing the art of ruling. Okay, now this gets weird. This is the hardest part of this excerpt from the Republic that you've had to read. So we're going to go through this really carefully and see if we can get our heads wrapped around what exactly it is that Thrasymachus is saying. So remember, initially Thrasymachus says, look, justice is an immoral term. Justice is a term of power, and it's a term that people who have power use to impose rules on people they rule over, to get those people they rule over to do the things that are in the best interest of the ruler. Socrates says no. And so now Thrasymachus has come up with this definition, says, well, a ruler who's truly practicing the art of ruling wouldn't make mistakes. They wouldn't do things that are against their own interest. If they did, then they wouldn't be really acting as a ruler that way. Okay, so let me give you an example to see if we can unpackage what Thrasymachus is getting at. Have you ever, in college or high school, have you ever had the experience of a teacher who you knew was not going to be receptive to your particular take on something, or your particular ideas about something, or your particular beliefs about something? Have you ever had a teacher that you knew was not going to be open to other points of view than his or her own? And you knew this so deeply that you knew, in order to be successful on your assignments, or to stay in the teacher's favor in class, you probably needed to repeat back to that person what you knew they would think themselves. And so then I would ask you, like, okay, is that really a teacher when somebody's doing that? And we'd say, well, technically, I guess. I mean, they have the title of teacher. They're standing there in the front of the room. They're the ones grading my paper. They're teachers. And then we dig into the definition a little more. It's like, well, what exactly is a teacher? Well, it's somebody who educates. Well, what's an education? Okay, and now we unpackage that a little bit, and we probably realize that what that teacher is doing is not providing an education. That teacher is providing indoctrination. And those are two very different kinds of things, right? So is that person a teacher in a technical sense, but they're not educators? And so if educator and teacher are synonymous, we would say that even though we would consider that person a teacher, it's really a surface consideration. It's not really somebody who's practicing the art of education. The art of education is when a teacher comes into the room and recognizes that they are not the most important person there. They have power, but it's the students who are sitting there vulnerable, who are trusting that educator to help them learn the things they need to learn in order to grow or be successful, and not to simply force the teacher's own particular ideology or ideas on those students. That's the abusive power. That's somebody who's not really an educator. right? And this is kind of the point that Socrates is going to get at here. He's saying, okay, Thrasymachus, you say that a ruler is truly practicing the art of ruling and is therefore a legit ruler only insofar as that person is not making mistakes. All right, well, let's apply that definition. Let's pursue this idea that there is a role called ruler or a role called educator that's somehow connected to the way that those people behave. And then Socrates uses this a series of sort of analogies or examples. Socrates says, a doctor uses the art of medicine to serve the interests of the body, of the patient, not the art of medicine. In other words, imagine you go to a doctor and the doctor is thinking, hey, this person's come to me, they're sick. Now, I think I know how to heal them. I think I know what kind of therapeutic treatment would be beneficial to them. But boy, I could really advance medicine if I used this experimental drug on them without them knowing it. And you'd probably say, that's not really practicing medicine. And if a doctor is somebody who uses the art of medicine to improve the body, this doctor ain't doing it. They're sort of corrupting. They're corrupting themselves as a doctor by not adhering to the true purpose of medicine. This is the weirder example that Socrates uses. A horseman uses the art of horsemanship to serve the interests of the horse, not the art of horsemanship. And what he means by this is, if there's somebody who's prides themselves on being an expert horse rider person, like let's say dressage or something like that, or some sort of tournament where horses are used, and they use that horse in order to advance their own standing without any regard for the well-being of the horse. They override it. They don't feed it properly. They don't hydrate it properly. They just want to get there as fast as they can. Well, the horse is going to die. And so therefore, the first job of a person is to practice the art of horsemanship. And that involves putting the needs of the horse first. Then you can advance horsemanship or your own self as a horse rider. And I just gave you the idea of the teacher. I had a colleague one time who went into a class on the first day and he assigned all of the student numbers and said, I don't want to know your names. I'm just here for the paycheck. I'm going to go through these numbers and I'm going to give you information. I'm going to get information from you in the order of these numbers. I don't need to know your names. And the students were just like, this is nuts. I'm leaving. This is not an education. This is not even a real teacher, right? Think about that. It's not a real teacher. Yeah, of course not. Because he's treating the students like things to serve his interests rather than their own interests. Okay, so now check this out. Here's what Socrates does. So rulers then, in order to really truly be rulers, would have to serve the interests of the ruled. Just like teachers serve the interests of the students, doctors serve the interests of the patients, horsemen serve the interest of the horse. And if that's true, and justice is nothing else than the interest of the ruled, not the rulers. In other words, Socrates completely flips this definition that Thrasymachus offers on its head by using the ideas that Thrasymachus has been using to develop his definition. Now, at this point in all of these dialogues, one of two things happen, right? Either this person says, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you've exposed the errors in my thinking. Why don't we figure this out together? Like, we both now realize that neither one of us really has much of an answer here. So let's kind of work together and see if we can advance this inquiry collegially, collaboratively. Or, screw you, dude, I'm done talking to you and you look funny. And it's the latter that Thrasymachus does in this case. He ends up just saying, like, you know what, Socrates, you're just full of hot air. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm leaving. And oftentimes that happens. And you know that happens in your own life too, right? There's sometimes when you come to this point in an argument and somebody gets so frustrated with realizing that what they were thinking doesn't make sense in some way, and they haven't yet figured out how to make it make sense. And so they end up doing something like, insulting you or yelling at you, or worst case, exercising physical force against you. But the other option that's always available to us is like, all right, I'm gonna have to think about that more. And that's really a good attitude to have, right? Philosophic humility. I don't know everything there is to know, and oftentimes things that I thought I knew, I turned out later on to find out that I didn't know those things. And this is another one of those moments, perhaps. So I'm going to chill, and I'm going to let go of some of these bad ideas that I've been holding on to, and I'm going to explore with my friends and see if I can't come to some better ideas. And that's kind of what Socrates would want us to do.